Hello again, I'm Doug Smith. This is the 26 February 2014 edition of Portsmouth This Week. The voice of Portsmouth Town Hall and beyond, as you'll see today. Our special guests here today are Representative Jay Edwards for District 70. Welcome back, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
And our own Senator Chris Ottiano, who represents Portsmouth, Bristol, I think, and
Tiverton.
Tiverton.
Yep. Thank you very
District
much.
11. And we know what the issue is going to be. But it just strikes me that you all have been really doing some serious work, and you've now got a bill in the works. And I think that's kind of what we want to talk about today. How's the progress on that?
Well, the progress has been good. We've been very active. And one of the issues that we've looked at, this is really a statewide issue.
Correct. You know, if I were to sort of frame it, you know, in the very beginning, one thing we've tried to emphasize from the beginning, because it started out as anti-toll. You heard about stop, and you want to stop a toll.
Right.
You don't want to have a toll. That's part of the process. But the bigger picture was that a toll hurts the economy in the state. You don't actually gain from it. So now, what leadership basically did, and what has come down, was that we had this opportunity to create a process that affects everyone. It's everyone's roads and bridges. What's been proposed here in this piece of legislation that's been submitted by Representative Edwards and by Senator Palma, this is comprehensive. I've been emphasizing over and over, how often does you see something in the State House that we're looking 10 years ahead? We're actually trying to do something that isn't in the middle of the night, that isn't last minute. It's all about everyone's roads and bridges, not just a particular bridge in the East Bay. And so that's what's really important about it, is this bill is comprehensive. It's for the state.
And one of the biggest parts of it is not just something that the three of us, Senator Palmer, Senator Ottiano, and myself, have worked on. In the House side, I've had all the members from the East Bay legislative delegation involved with this. We have consistently sent them drafts. We've gotten input and feedback from them. Representatives Canario and Finn and Gallison have been extremely helpful. We've even gotten help from Representative Marshall, and we've even got help from Representative O'Grady, who's from the other end of the state, who is very, very involved with public transportation and who is bringing that whole component into this big piece of legislation, because this, as the Senator mentioned, is very comprehensive. It's a very complex bill, and it's an all-encompassing. It's a 10-year plan, and that's something that's novel for this state.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because we always call this here the toll issue, but as you say, it's much more comprehensive than that, and I think that's a great way to look at it, and maybe it's a great way to get our way out of this thing. So you all have crafted a bill. You've submitted it to the Finance Committee, I guess. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what are some of the funding sources and other parts of that bill? Well,
the first part of it is what we established is an infrastructure trust fund, a place where all the money can go. We anticipate receiving about $900 million to $1 billion over the course of 10 years. That's a lot of money. So we wanted to make sure that money was going to be used solely for infrastructure. So we set up a trust fund that is beyond the reach of the General Assembly, that will be set up so that the Rhode Island DOT can access this money to do what they need to do, which is fix our roads and bridges. And one of the items that's going to be key to that whole fund is we are capping the amount of money that our departments can spend by 0.25% more every year. Presently, all of our departments are capped at 97%. They can't spend more than 97%. And that 3% is put towards the rainy day fund and also RICAP funds, capital improvements. We've added 0.25% per year, which will total over 6 years 1.5. That money is dedicated towards infrastructure. So after 6 years, the Rhode Island DOT will have $52.5 million a year they can almost bank on, that's going to be used for them exclusively for their infrastructure. This is on top of what they already get in our budget.
Okay, so for everybody takes a 0.25% haircut here.
Per year.
That would seem to be fairly easy to come up with or figure on, I would think. Per year over 5 year period?
6 years.
6 year period?
Gets us to 1.5, which is $52.5 million.
Okay.
So over that time, the first year it'll be smaller money, which Senator Ottiano will address. But for the first few years, the first 5 years, the money is not that large. in the last 5 years, there's a lot of money going to the Rhode Island DOT.
Okay.
And I think that your point is a very good one. You say, well, it seems pretty easy, 0.25%. But I mean, it's designed to be something that legislators can get behind. 0.25% of the yearly revenue rededicated. That is something that anyone working on the budget can say, we can find that. The whole idea is not to shock the system. No one can, there's no sense in making a grandiose plan that shocks the system and no one can really get behind. So I think that component Representative Edwards has placed in there is very, very doable.
Now, what kind of responses have you all received just informally since you've put the legislation on the table?
The people I've spoken with have been actually surprised at how bold the program is and how comprehensive. And one of the biggest components I have found is that it's not new money. With one very small exception, this is all existing funds. Our infrastructure is so important to the entire state.
Absolutely,
everything depends on it, that for the other departments to take a 0.25% hit is key to them. It's a key to their development, because without infrastructure, you can't go to college, you can't go to school, you can't get to your job. So all the other departments are really dependent on our infrastructure.
So you would think that they'd get on board on this thing, and we hope.
We hope.
We hope.
Okay, so that would be a primary funding source. What else?
Correct. Well, the second of what I call the two major ones, I think that the next major one it has to do with how we pay for our debt service with DOT. Very simple, the key part that I think people need to keep in mind is that we were getting into trouble dating back a couple of years ago where our debt service on what we owed to do our yearly maintenance. Remember the old days, every 2 years a bond, 20%. We borrowed 20% to get the match of our 80%, incurring more debt. The debt service was getting bigger. So the response, and I give the governor's office some reasonable credit for this. This was a major part in the last 2 years. We got away from that. The state started paying every year more and more of DOT's debt service, about $10 million a year. Well, the rational conclusion to that is DOT has $10 million per year more to spend. And before that becomes a wash somewhere in the great abyss, we need to pull that to where it's dedicated and say, look, that money is going to be going directly to this issue. Now, what that means is $10 million this year, $10 million next year, similar fashion. By 5 years from now, that's another $50 million a year into the process. Sure. Ballparking.
You add up those $10 million, it becomes real money.
Exactly. Hey, there you go. There you go. And that's, again, this is not a shock to the system. This is already in place. We're just simply identifying it and saying, look, before this goes anywhere, it should go here.
Okay, so those are two major funding sources that are basically, should be fairly painless almost, you'd think.
Well, you would hope, but I know every department head is going to be looking at this saying, well, how can I deal with less money? And as I said before, every department is really dependent on our infrastructure, and they need to understand that. Their people won't even be able to go to work if we don't have good roads and bridges.
Yeah.
People won't be coming to the state of Rhode Island to work, to recreate, to do anything if our roads and bridges are a mess.
And this is simply their way, a way that they can support this, essentially, which is critical, I think.
The one very small new money source that we looked at was adding a 5% increase across the board on all DMV fees. And one of the reasons we did that was because, like I said earlier, the early years, the first 5 years, there's not a lot of money going in towards this infrastructure fund. We actually put a provision in the bill that would sunset that increase. And I believe it's like 1.5% or 2% of the whole total amount of money that we're looking to raise for our infrastructure fund. So you have 5 years, 5% increase in fees across the board for DMV. That's really the only new source of income we have.
Wow, that's kind of amazing you guys were able to come up with this. Let's keep our fingers crossed that everybody looks at it that way.
No, and that is worthy of. I think it's very important to stop for a second and emphasize that. Representative Edwards put it perfectly. It has a sunset to it, and it's a very small piece of the the puzzle, and the question might be posed, well, then why is it there? Well, it's there because, remember the point Representative Edwards made about the money grows as the years grow because of
Right.
what's occurring.
In the initial years when you need the money.
That's right. This is initial money to help the process that can go away later, and so we'll call it early money.
Yeah.
This is early money where the vast majority does kick in by years 4 through 10.
Okay, this bill that you put in, I think it's your House 7432 is the number of it, I believe. What other kind of provisions were there in there? One of the things that caught my eye was putting RITBA, the Rhode Island Bridge and Tunnel Authority, under DOT.
That was actually my favorite part. I really looked forward to that. When Senator Palmer had his end drafted in the Senate, he had it put as the Rhode Island Bridge Authority as a department within DOT, and I really liked that.
Well, it does kind of make sense. Apparently, RITBA has the tolling authority, so they could continue the tolls on the big bridge there, the Newport Bridge. What other kind of provisions does it have that we need to talk about?
If I may,
Absolutely.
that provision alone, we've got to make sure, as we already are, we've got to be prepared for the questions people are going to ask and all the criticisms and think of the little barbs they're going to throw. In the past, we heard, well, what about the Turnpike and Bridges bonds and their bonding authority? Are you going to interfere with that? That's the whole point, is by simply moving them in to become a division of DOT, there's efficiency, there's a better structure there, that they can maintain the toll process they have right now. We're not going to be endangering their bonds. I don't think they can make an argument that we're changing something about the bonding process that will default anything.
Yeah.
So that criticism is taken away. And of course, we gain the efficiency of getting under control this process.
You wouldn't think that a state this small would need two organizations just to keep your bridges and highways maintained, but I guess that's how it's evolved. And one of the problems, of course, in Rhode Island and New England in general is it's very difficult to change the status quo. And I just wonder what RITBA has been having to say about this.
I haven't heard hide nor hair from them. I've heard a little bit from DOT. They're really reviewing the bill. Mike Lewis, director of DOT, challenged us to come up with $1 billion plan, and I think we have done that. And I think we've done something that our colleagues, both the Senate and the House, can look at very well and have an easier sell to their constituents, because it's going to help all the bridges and roads across the state. One of the things also with putting the Turnpike and Bridge Authority into Rhode Island DOT is when they go out for future bonds, they will have to go as general obligation bonds. They will get a much better rate. So there's an efficiency there as well, because the general obligation bonds are guaranteed by the whole state. They get a much better rate than Turnpike and Bridge Authority gets right now.
Okay, so there's a lot of other reasons as well, just practical reasons for doing this.
And we've heard consistently, have we not, about how the Turnpike and Bridge Authority is really good at collecting tolls. So we thought, what better function for them to do solely than just collect the tolls?
You go, guys.
And I think there's a level of efficiency and common sense to it. You can't help but look at the process where when the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority's board meets, the director of DOT is on that board. I don't see why that can't be merged together. It just seems like there's enough redundancy there that as you said, they're all doing the same job in different versions in different ways. It can't be that can't be consolidated.
Well, but that's why we have 39 school districts and 39 governments and 39 police departments, in the state, and it's just very difficult to walk that back.
It's the parochial nature of Rhode Island.
Well, but it's because of the history. We've got a history, and it's just, So let's talk a little bit about the timing of this bill and how the system works, how the legislature works. You submitted this bill, a couple of weeks ago, was it?
Yes.
So it goes through the Finance Committee, and then what happens? And what kind of times are we talking about here?
Well, right now, I don't know about the Senate Finance Committee. I know the House Finance Committee is really tied up reviewing the governor's budget. So there'll be a delay in getting this bill heard. To that end, we have put in a bill that will move the end date of
Saw that yesterday.
from April 1st to July 1st, and Senator Palmer put it in on the Senate side.
Correct.
I had the entire House leadership team sign on to the bill as co-sponsors. So I think we have good momentum in the House to get that portion through fairly quickly.
Okay, and just to clarify, that bill was because the toll authority was, unless we had something by 1 April, which everybody thought was kind of a very difficult deadline anyway, the tolls could be reimposed on the bridge. And what this second bill is to postpone that until July or
Gives us time to vet the main bill.
Okay.
Gives our colleagues time to understand it, and also gives us the opportunity to get it into the budget.
Which is where you want this thing to go.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And I think that's, again, good common sense. You're talking about a 10-year span, $1 billion in spending and revenue. That's probably got to be end up in the budget, yeah.
Yeah. So the key will be the relatively quick passage of that second bill to get that taken care of. Do you think that's reasonable?
I do. I mean, a number of members actually asked me if I was going to introduce it for immediate consideration. And I said, I'd have it run the process, but I think we'll get it quick.
And Jay can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't see any detriment to anybody by moving back a small amount. I mean, I can't think of any financial implication that has, even to Turnpike and Bridge or DOT. I'm sure there can be some argued in some way, but I just don't see that a 60-day or 90-day extension in somehow irreparably harms anyone.
Yeah, and unless there's somebody with a political agenda that for some reason wants to keep that hammer somehow, and which would be tragic, I think, because I think all of these things make sense, and the way you're approaching this, I think, makes a lot of sense. So I applaud you both and your group for that. How can we, the general public, follow the progress of these things? Like, I'd like to know when this thing moves from one place to the other, for example. How can I do that?
Well, I think that, you remember when every time we've been here to talk about this, I think we've mentioned each time that, after the bill was submitted, sometimes you got to expect deafening silence for a little while, because it works its way around. People have to read it, people have to think about it and digest it, and a lot of legislators, this has been all-consuming for us for 2 years.
Absolutely.
But for many legislators, they're sort of just coming around to this now and saying, oh, okay, we're readdressing that. So they've got to get the data reloaded up into their brains in terms of what we're looking at, chew on these numbers. It is $1 billion. So they should be asking questions and give everyone a chance, but the process will move along to a point of hearing, and we've got to do a lot of education in that time period.
Yeah. I think people you can go on a website, RILIN.
Yes.
I believe.
Or you just hit Rhode Island General Assembly in Google, it'll come up.
And I think you can put in a thing for when any particular bill moves, you get notified, so that might be one way for people to follow it,
The General Assembly has gotten a lot more transparent and easier to use online over the last few years.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the trend everywhere. Let's hope it continues. It's a good thing for everybody. So how and when should East Bay residents, guys like me we kind of have an interest in this thing, how can we make our voices heard, relating to this bill? I mean, we can talk to you guys. But
I would say we'll probably wait until we have the first hearing, which would be, I would imagine, sometime in late March, early April.
Yeah, agreed. And we sort of touched on the idea, this program will actually be out there on YouTube, and I think Representative Edwards and I can probably look at using this information to get out to people. The real big question is, how do you get the person in Cumberland to realize they want this too?
Yeah.
I mean, we want a groundswell, of course, here, but they have roads and bridges. If anywhere in the state, if the roads right now look really great to you, then you don't have to worry about this. But if our media, television, radio, newspaper is dominated by issue after issue nowadays, potholes, frost heaves, lack of maintenance, weather issues. This is so important. So everyone around the state, not just the East Bay, they should all be saying this is 10-year plan, good for us.
And this is not unique to Rhode Island. I just recently came back from Portland, Maine, and the roads up there were horrendous through potholes. This weather has been probably one of the worst ones on record for destroying our roads.
Yeah, I think Portsmouth's done very well. I went into Providence. I really rarely go off the island, okay? But I went into Providence the other day to go to PPAC for something, and God, the roads are terrible and compared to ours. I mean, they have potholes you could fall into and nobody would know you're missing for a couple of weeks, you know?
You could rent them out to small families.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. So, yeah, that is a big issue. And again, all this maintenance stuff would be kind of taken care of by this infrastructure bill you guys propose. I mean, everything to do with the roads and bridges, all the maintenance would be subsumed under this DOT, which would make a lot of sense.
And I think a couple of other components, and I know Representative Edwards has been a real force dealing with the Rhode Island RIPTA and the bus transit system, and he's been introducing, the process of getting them back down into Tiverton, which he's been battling with them for years for the people at Tiverton. There's another component in this. The idea being we're really trying to look at a comprehensive process. We're looking at how busing service works, roads work.
Yeah.
As he said, the core principle of government. First, everyone's got to be able to get around before they can do commerce, before they can do government.
Yeah, public transportation is a big part of the infrastructure, and I understand that in that bill you've got to increase funding for RIPTA as part of that.
Over the course of the first 5 years, it eventually comes out to be about $50 million, which is a lot of money for RIPTA. They have been really almost like a red-haired stepchild when it comes to the transportation in the state. And we need something that's reliable, that people can bank on so they can go back and forth to work or school or wherever.
Yeah.
And that's something that is really essential for us as a state. It's a service that we need to provide.
Yeah. So how soon do you think we will know whether the first bill, the one about changing from April to July, is going to pass?
That'll happen pretty quick.
Okay. And you guys will tell us right away, I'm sure.
I'm sure. You'll see us jumping up and down on the Senate and House floors.
Okay, well, that's great. So I look forward to hearing from you guys on that and keeping track of it. I think the Daily News and the other media have been pretty good about keeping up with this stuff, and a couple of very informative articles recently. As they say, that's where I got my background, what little there is to what you guys are doing. Are there any other parts of the bill, the big bill, that you want to talk about that might be?
Well, one of the issues that we need to look at, I mean, everyone complains about how we haven't really had an economic program in this state and we haven't really addressed jobs. If we put $1 billion of our own money back into our infrastructure, that will equate to about $600 million in labor costs, which over the course of a 10-year period is 500 jobs for that 10-year period. If we were to do this all in 1 year, there'd be 5,000 jobs. Imagine the impact that would have. But over a 10-year period, 500 jobs added to our economy. Those are new jobs. And then beyond those, for every construction job you add, full-time construction job, you add like a job and a quarter outside on the peripheral, things to support restaurants, services, all these other industries benefit when construction adds more jobs. So overall, you're adding like 650, 700 jobs just with our own money. And then from that, we would get income taxes, our sales taxes. The whole state would benefit from this program. And it's money that we generated. We're not bringing it in from outside. It's our money, and it's going to benefit us as a state. So I think that's a further benefit that we all need to look at.
Absolutely, I would think so. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that aspect, but certainly. I'm sure I have to tell you, I'm very impressed with the depth at which you all have thought this thing out. I mean, I can't say enough about, it just seems like you've really hit, I think, all the key issues here.
Well, I'm sure there are some that we missed, but
no, I think
we worked really
you guys did a
long
great
and
job,
hard.
and I think you certainly deserve all of our support on this thing, and that's what I say. If you can figure out a way we can mobilize, if you get caught in a crunch up there, to make the phones ring or something, we could do that.
Well, I'd say, I guess it's definitely worthy of two thank yous. First of all, all the local, reps and senators have been a part of this. But, I certainly, I owe a big thanks to Senator Palma and to Representative Edwards, because I hope that the local population and geography, and even the state, sees some bipartisan activity here. This has been a geographical issue, and the Senator and the Representative have been tremendously cordial, and there's never been a any indication that I couldn't participate in this or that they wanted to do this themselves. It's been a wonderful experience working with them. And then secondly, we got to thank the locals who have been so active, the Portsmouth Business Association, the STOP organization. You talk about, they've been at all the commission meetings, they've been at all the hearings, plus they're holding their own weekly meetings. And Representative Edwards has been there to meet them. I have, the other reps and senators have, so it's been good.
And John Viss wearing body paint when he goes into the roller dives and all that stuff. So
That was a little scary.
that was, you were there, if you recall, yeah. Now, we've talked about the bill. Just let me recap, because I think these two things are important. The two major funding sources are, one, coming up with money from that would have gone, decreasing the amount that the legislature can spend from the rainy day fund.
The departments can spend.
Okay, by 0.25% a year for 6 years. That's a major part of the funding. The second one would be, as you say, a 5% addition to DMV fees. That would be like
That's a
licensing
very
fees.
small percentage.
Okay, and then
And the other part is
the fact that the DOT debt service is being paid by $10 million increments more
right.
each year by
So that's
by the
kind of
state.
money that's already there, more or less.
these are all existing funds. Like
Yeah.
we said, the only new tax or fee is a surcharge on all DMV fees for the first 5 years. And we were very clear about having a sunset provision in the law so that that would not continue. The General Assembly loves to.
I know, temporary taxes.
Temporary
and-
tax,
yeah.
like the temporary increase in sales tax for the RIPEC.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Tiverton, they had that on there, the increased sales tax, and it still hasn't gone away. We've actually put a very clear, succinct closure on this.
Okay, and this is guaranteed, right, Jay?
I wouldn't guarantee anything. Future legislators could, they could do whatever they want, but.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, you guys have been, I know, working this thing full-time and more. Is there anything else you want to talk to your constituents about while we got you here anything else going on besides just,
Honestly, I don't think, I would really emphasize the importance of this.
I think we all know
I mean,
that, yeah.
in that, the short answer to that question is there's always more stuff going on at the State House. There's obviously there's hundreds and hundreds of bills being submitted, but this takes center stage, particularly for us, and we're trying to get that message across to other legislators and everyone in the state, the education process. The last thing I said at the commission meetings, and I'll leave it here today, is the very uneasy feeling that anyone might have about this bill is the fact that we're doing what we normally don't do.
Yes.
We're thinking ahead, we're trying to be proactive, we're trying to help the whole state.
Yeah.
Better roads, more money for construction, more jobs, economic stimulus, taking care of, our state ahead of time. Show me what the argument against this is.
And this is one occasion when our small size actually helps us do that. Where else in the country could a state take a third of their money over the course of 10 years and put it towards their infrastructure and do it with their own money and not have a helping hand from the federal government?
Yeah.
This is something because we're so small, we can actually do.
well, I think that's great, and I'll be the first to buy Jay Edwards and Chris Ottiano T-shirts once you guys get this bill passed.
We'll just give them to you.
Well, let's see. Yeah, sure, why not? I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on again, and I hope you'll continue as we go forward with this process. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on it, and I'd like to thank you all for all your hard work. I know you both have day jobs, which is incredible to me, and while you're doing all this legislative work, but thank you very much, and we appreciate everything you do for us. I know that's not always obvious, but it's true.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Doug Smith signing off. We'll see you next time on Portsmouth This Week.